All right. Let's get to it, boys and girls. Let's look at trade once again. We're going to play off of what we learned in comparative advantage. Okay, so we have a country that's isolated itself from the rest of the world. It's trying to decide whether to open its textiles market to the rest of the world. You've been asked to assist in this. So you've been asked to report on 3 questions that will come up that must be asked in terms of opening our borders to trade. First question, if the government allows the country to import and export textiles, what will happen to the price of textiles and the quantity of textiles sold in the domestic textile market? I'm going to pause here, give you a second to write that down. All right, I'm done. Next question, who will gain from free trade in textiles and who will lose? And will the gains exceed the losses? Okay, so that's question number 2. And then question number 3 says, if we open ourselves up to trade, should we put a tariff, and which is a tax on textiles, to be part of the new trade policy? So we'll open up our doors to trade, but we're not going to make it totally free. We're going to put some sort of restrictions, tariffs on the trade. Right, so what we want to do is, before we address, we want to go back and just look at some basic supply and demand curves, and then look at consumer producer surplus, and look at opening up the country to trade. Okay, so we have our regular graph. This is just a country that has textiles and they're not trading with anyone, right? There's their blue is consumer surplus, their red is producer surplus. So we'll label it A and C. Okay, the price, the world price, is above the equilibrium price. So we open up the world to this, and the price is going to be higher, which means our producers are going to gravitate towards the higher price, right? So what ends up happening here is we have the new world price. Now, because the price is higher, our consumers are only getting a surplus of A. B is now going to the producers, and D is the gain of trade by trade, and it's also going to the producers. Right, because with the higher price, our quantity demanded is here, but our quantity supplied is there, right? So because we're open to the rest of the world, this is the producers exporting the goods, okay? And then we put this here, and we look at the greenish area. The B is consumer surplus lost to the producer, and then the D triangle is the gain from trade. Okay, so we gained D. Yes, the consumers lost B, but the producers got it. So we're not too upset by that. Unless you're a consumer, then yeah, I guess you are upset. All right, now let's break it down this way. Consumer surplus before trade, A and B. After trade, just A. So the change is loss of B. Producer surplus was just C. After trade, it's B, C, and D. Okay, which is a gain of B and D. And then what did we gain in total surplus? The total gain of trade was D, which did not exist before. All right, now let's look at the price, the world price being lower than the equilibrium price. So in this case now, with that, A, B, and D is consumer surplus, and C is the producer surplus. So again, the producer now in this case is losing B to the consumer. So the consumer is gaining in this scenario, which kind of makes sense. If the price is lower than equilibrium, you would expect consumers to gain. And if the price is above equilibrium, you would expect the producers to gain. So what we have here is the amount that our producers, domestic, want to produce is right here. But our consumers want this much. How do we fix this problem? We import the goods, and that's D, right? So D is the increase in imports. All right, now we look at it. Consumer before trade was just A. Now it's A, B, and D. They gained B, D. Producer before trade was B and C. They are now just C, so they lost B. But the country as a whole, gained D. All right, so now we're going to do one more, right? We're going to do, the green line is the price without a tariff. All right, so we're throwing in all these letters, A, B, C, D, E, and F are all consumer surplus. G is producer surplus. QS1 is the quantity that our producers are willing to supply. QD1 is the amount that we want, our domestic consumers. Okay? And then this part are the imports. Okay, we are importing this amount. That might upset some of the producers because before the producers were here, right? And they were getting this amount. So they might be upset. They reach out to the government. They say, listen, we need a hand. You got to put a tariff on these people. So we put a tariff. The red line is the tariff. Okay, so now with the tariff, consumer surplus is just A and B, right? Consumer surplus, C and G. D, nope, gone. F, gone. What's E? Let's take a moment and think about that. What is E? E is the area, because this is the imports, right? This is how much we're importing, but we're taxing them. So this is revenue to the government. E is revenue to the government, right? So if E is bigger than the loss of D and F, we could argue that we're better off with the tariff, right? So let's break all this down. I will take it a little slower. So consumer surplus was A, B, C, D, E, and F. After tariffs, we were just A and B. So consumers in this case lost C, D, E, and F. Again, somebody's losing while someone's gaining, right? The producer surplus was just G. After trade, they gained C, okay? The government was getting no revenue before. They're now getting the area of E as their revenue. So therefore, they're getting a plus there. But as a total, we lost D and F, okay? So a couple of questions. If the government allows the country to import and export textiles, what will happen to the price of textiles and the quantity sold in the domestic textile market? Right? The answer is, once trade is allowed, the price of textiles will be driven to the equilibrium price. So it's either going to go up, which is going to benefit the producers, or the price is going to go down, which will benefit the consumers. And if the price goes up, we're going to export. If the price goes down, we're going to import. 2, who will gain from free trade in textiles? And who will lose, and will the gains exceed the losses? So the answer depends on whether the price rise or fall when trade is allowed. So as I said earlier, the price falls, consumer gains, and the producer loses, and vice versa. Okay, question is, should a tariff be part of the new trade policy? So the question is, tariff has an impact only if the country becomes a textile importer. So, you know, if we're putting a tax on something that we're not importing, it doesn't really have any point. There is revenue coming in. The producers are gaining, but they're gaining from our consumers, right? So this is something you might want to think about when you hear in the news that we put a tariff on China and China pays the tariff and we're winners, right? And the U.S. is getting all that revenue. So just remember that. Go back to that graph and look at what consumers lost when that happened. We'll talk about that more in class. Okay? So the analysis shows there are winners and losers, right? Now in this world, we're all winners, right? Everybody's a winner. Get the trophies, line them up. The analysis shows that there are winners and losers when a nation opens up trade. Okay, but the gains to the winner exceeds the losses of the losers. So what are some of the benefits of international trade? Increased variety of goods. You guys love variety of goods. Lower cost through economies of scale. Increased competition, right? One firm makes another one better. You know I'm going to say Samsung makes Apple better. I know you're going to get upset, but it's true. They push each other. That's what competition does. Okay, what are the arguments for restricting trade? Obviously, number 1, jobs. Number 2, national security. 3, infant industry. What if the industry is just beginning and they need time to develop? We can't have them competing with foreign companies that have been doing this forever, right? The problem is once you give an industry this tariff, protection, they never really want to give it up, all right? And then there's unfair competition, right? China's another one we can go back and look at. And there are some others. And then one of the arguments for restricting trade we can use it as a bargaining chip, right? And which has been done. I would love to take shots at the current on his way out president, but I cannot because he's not the first president to use these. I will say he's the first president to put them on and not be forced to take them off or panic and take them off. All right, so there you go. That's about all I got. All right.